talking about kata today. Bonus points if you jump in the comments and let me know which kata I was just doing. We're picking up where I left off last week, where I talked about why I still teach kata, and this week we're talking about how I teach kata, how I continue to implement it and utilize it in our school. kenfuTV, and each week I release videos on the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing you're into. I hope you stick around. I hope that you subscribe. I hope that you continue to watch these as they come out and continue to be part of the community, hitting those comments and having conversations with us while we journey through this martial world together. Some of these videos are a bit longer than the average attention span, so always check that description for chapter markers to be able to jump to the part that you're interested in. But if you're keen, maybe watch the whole video. Sure helps my channel out when you do that. The truth is, YouTube uses whether or not you finish watching the video to determine if the video was any good. So if there was useful information in the first 5 minutes and then you jump out, it just goes, well, that video must have sucked. I hate that. I feel like that's not really conducive to long-form media. I digress. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about how I teach kata and how I feel that it's still important. Last week's video, jump to that if you haven't seen it. Last week's video was on why I think kata is important, so I'm not going to be talking about that today. That's what that video was for. You can find it right here. How I teach kata, my approach, the way that I do it. I'm sharing this because it's the way that I do it, and that's what kenfu is all about, is sharing what I do so that you can process and determine if anything that I do is useful to you, or is garbage and you should tell me about it so that I can continue to improve myself. That's what the comments are so good for. So that said, disclaimer, this is not how I'm telling you that you should teach kata. I'm not telling you that I have the perfect answer. I'm telling you this is what I do and what I do right now. It's not what I've always done. I've gone through permutations and I've evolved the way that I do it over time, and I will continue to do so. So maybe later, 5-10 years from now, I'll have to make another video on how I do it then, if I even still do. But for now, this is what I do, and I hope that it has some benefit for you. If it does, or if you have questions about how I do it or what I do, hit those comments and let's talk about it. First off, one of the biggest changes that I've made to how I teach kata is I don't teach kata. Yeah, that sounded just as weird in my head as it did out loud. When I first learned, it was you got together and part of the training was to start learning kata, and here's the moves, and everybody went through them a little bit at a time. Did the first 2 or 3 moves, and you did that over and over again, and then you added the next couple moves. You did that over and over again. You get through half. Then you continue doing that for the second half of the kata without the first half, and then you brought it all together until you had the whole thing figured out. Worked really good for that kind of memorization of the kata, but lately I don't really want to focus on the memorization of the kata. I don't believe that that's what it was there for. I believe that it's useful. I don't believe that that's what it was there for. So right now, how do I teach kata without teaching kata? Well, first, I start with people who already know the kata. And at the beginning of every class, we run through, in our style, we have 2 kihon kata that I built, I made myself to cover specific things that I wanted to pass on to students and to address a specific thing. If you want to know more about that, let me know, and I'll make a video on the kihon kata and why I did what I did. After that, we go through the heian katas 1 through 5, or pinan if that's what you're familiar with, and then the teki or nahachi katas 1 through 3. At the beginning of every class, there's a basic toe to head warm up where we start at the ground and work our way up all the way, and going through and making sure, I call it a joint lubrication, because it just gets every part of the body moving, gets the heart rate going a little bit, and then we jump right into it. I don't want that to take more than 5 minutes because I want people to get into training as soon as possible. We only have an hour, so I try to keep that short. This brings me to why I do the kata the way that I do as well. So much time is lost to performing kata. You get together and you spend 45 minutes learning how to do kata and practicing them together and working on them and refining them, and pretty soon you haven't done anything. So instead, after the warm-up, what I do is I have my senpai, my senior student, take over and go through the katas, just lead them 1 time each. She goes through and does them. She just calls the name, does the kata, calls the next name, does the kata. 1 bow before the kata starts, 1 bow at the very last kata, and that's it. 5 to 10 minutes to go through all of those katas 1 time. I say that I don't teach the kata because I don't. New students now, when they show up, they just get to do that. I let them know that it's a lot. I give them a heads up, hey, this next part that's right after the warm-up is a lot. I don't expect you to remember anything. That's not what it's about. I just want you to do your best and follow along as best you can. Insert secret training. What I'm really doing is asking them to steal the kata from the people around them. to watch and to learn and to pluck pieces away until they know it. Because I'm not worried about whether or not they know the whole kata or they know it perfect. I'm here to teach you how to defend yourself. I'm here to teach you how to fight, how to strike and grapple and do all these things. That's what I'm here to do. So how well you perform this kata, not critical. I'll get back to how I refine that. I don't just leave it. It's later. The katas are even done at a fairly steady, steep pace. It's not meant to slow down and help people out. If you didn't get it, don't worry about it. I believe that what happens naturally in any case, and has proven itself to happen in this case, is people naturally try to become better. Think of somebody learning the words to a song. They hear it on the radio and they pick up a few words, and then each time they try to pick up a few more until they have the whole song figured out. That's the way that kata is being taught. I'm not teaching it. I didn't lie about that. It's the way that kata is being taught. It's the way that kata is being shared in my school. So over time, they pick that up, but I'm not worried about that. So let's get into what I am worried about. I'm worried about the lessons that are derived from the kata, specific drills that come out of the kata that follow the principles and methods and techniques and strategies that are part of that. After all that's done, everybody grabs a drink, and then usually myself or senpai or somebody like that will go ahead and start demonstrating something that you're going to do with a partner, because that's what we're here to do. At home, maybe we don't have a partner, maybe we don't have a space to train, maybe we don't have all this stuff. So when we're in the dojo, we should use the things that are afforded to us specifically because we're there. What are those things? A place to train with lots of room that you're not going to break anything or have to worry about that. A place where you can be loud and rough and whatever, and it's not a big deal. A place where you can work with other people and instruction or guidance from somebody who knows more than you do. That's what happens in a dojo. So we start with that. We start with, here's what I want you to train tonight. Here's what we're working. These are the combinations that we're doing. These are the throws that we're doing. This is whatever it is, whatever the lessons are. As soon as possible, I want people working with partners and training and doing this stuff and becoming better at it. After that, all it comes down to is connecting that and making sure there's a reference to the kata itself and how this fits, so that there is still a connection. You gotta connect those dots to go, hey, in the kata you have these movements, and these movements represent these kinds of things that we did today. One of them very specifically looks like this, and that's the one that the kata is, maybe showing. And then here's other variations that we did throughout the day, but they all follow the same principle that was taught in that same set of movements inside the kata. And just create that connection so that maybe next time they come to class, when they're doing the kata, that thought's in their head. I remember this. I remember that this means this. And so now, over time, they're slowly building and understanding and refining for themselves how the kata moves, because they're attaching it to what it felt like to do the technique that the kata was showing. Maybe it was tying up with somebody and throwing a knee. Well, now maybe they didn't get that for the first time. That's a really obvious one. So that was a kind of a bad example, but maybe they didn't get that right away. But now when they do the kata, they think, oh yeah, I'm grabbing a neck. So before they'd go, okay, I do this. That's something like that. Now when they're doing the kata, they're boom, because they're thinking about it. They're processing. This is when I grab somebody by the neck and I smash their face. And so now that part of the kata is a little more explosive, a little more dynamic, and a little more representative of what's happening. So over time, they're building in this concept of what's happening. So they're learning the kata, but I'm not worried about teaching the kata. I'm not worried about defining and explicitly saying, here is your kata. I'm worried about them having what the kata is for. Another thing that's important that we continue to do, thing number 3, is sparring and grappling. That can be done in a variety of different ways, and I'm continuing to work and build on different ways. Because if I'm honest, this is probably the area that I'm working on the most right now, because I came up in a very kind of consensual fighting type environment. So all the kata and the lessons, the throws and the grappling and the chokes and the arm breaks and all the different things that you could do to somebody, that sounds so bad. All of those things, they didn't really happen because suddenly we're at long range. We both know we're fighting, so we're in and out and we're dancing around. It becomes more of a how do I not get hit but hit you, and how do I feint high and hit low and do all this kind of stuff. It was fun. It was great. It was good. But the number of times that I actually used things that we spent the rest of the time training was minimal. So right now, if I'm honest, we drill more than we spar, because I'm working on how I can implement sparring in a way that includes those things and encourages those things, that supports those things, and doesn't immediately just evolve back into long-range consensual fighting. Because one of the biggest problems that I have with sparring is the idea that it's consensual. We both know we're doing it, and we're both okay with a little bit of a trade, a little bit of give and take, where real violence doesn't work that way. It's awfully one-sided. And if I don't learn how to flip the switch and bring that one side to you instead of you bringing it to me, then I'm gonna struggle. I'm gonna fail. And sparring doesn't usually do that, because once things kind of start to not really work, people break out, reset, and then go back in. It's not really good training. That's a training scar for how violence happens. When things go wrong for somebody who's trying to hurt you, typically they try harder. They don't pull out, reset, and start over. And I don't want to train that way. I'm fine with it. We have people in the school that compete, and there's competitive and point fighting and all that kind of stuff, and fine with it. I don't personally do it, but I think that it's great. And especially if you're younger and athletic and you want to go do that stuff, I think it's awesome. But I don't think that it's training for self-protection. It's skill development, and there is an overlap. There's a bit of a byproduct, but not a true byproduct. It's not how I want to train. So right now I'm working on developing ways that we can continue to train that encourage and support testing and doing the skills that we're trying to develop in each other. One of the things that has been really great to start with is a thing called belt tag. We have our gis on, right? We got our belts, and it starts off, you pair off with somebody, and first person to lose their belt loses. Simple. Sometimes we do it by elimination. So if you lose your belt, you're out, and the people who kept their belt continue to fight until everybody's out. The thing that I like about it is because it's not focused on winning by hitting or doing something like that, people are instantly closer. They're reaching for each other's belts, so they're naturally having to manage each other's limbs and keep people from grabbing what they want to grab. And they're having to, they can't just hold their belt because meanwhile they still have a job to accomplish, which is to get the belt off of the other person. And so they still have to find ways to manage what that person's doing, manage their limbs, manage their movement, and still get in and accomplish their goal. I really like it. It's super fun. It's a hell of a warm-up. It'll really get the heart going because you're explosively, dynamically working. But the thing is, the entire time you're in the range that karate teaches. It teaches this close grappling, throwing, striking kind of way, and you're learning how to move limbs and do all of that. So that will be part of how my expansion into sparring moves, but I'm still working through that. So if you have ideas, if you have thoughts specifically, I do want you to hit the comments, but don't tell me about them. Link me to a video of you doing them. I want to see how you do it, or make a video talking about how you do this and why you do it and how you think it's working. This is one of the areas that I think there is a huge failure and part of why there's such a big rift. Pardon the derailment of this video. There's a big rift in people that believe in traditional martial arts and people that believe in combat sports, because combat sports, they go, everything's tested through sparring. Traditional martial arts, well, it's all about self-defense. And so it's really important that there are things that are built that work up to how do we encourage sparring while working into the self-defense scenario. I don't bring it together. They're not equal. They're not the same. So they have to have specific tools built for them. So I want to hear what's working for you and even what's not working for you, what you didn't like. So that's kind of the sparring and the grappling of it, and that will continue to expand. It's got to be tested live. It's got to be tested where you're in a place where you don't know what's coming. You're trying to get to something, but it's not preset. In drills, very often it's preset. Somebody knows what's about to happen, and the other person's working it. There's a little bit of, you can resist and make it more difficult, but you still both are working to do the same thing. Whereas sparring and grappling, that kind of thing, instead you're trying to accomplish these things, but the other person doesn't know that you're trying to do them. And that's an important part. How do I do that while you're trying to accomplish something you're trying to do? How do I turn around and make what I want to do happen? From a self-defense and self-protection perspective, things like understanding the law and scenario drills that involve role-playing and working through specific situations where escape and avoidance and that sort of thing are built in is also critical. So that kind of still falls into that sparring, but some of it's mental. Lastly, I do spend some time refining the biomechanical aspects of the kata as those things become learned. It's low priority. It used to be the first priority. The first thing that we did was spend that time refining and becoming good at the kata, and then you learn a little bit of how it all works. And then maybe you start learning your next kata. It was important to me that become the least important. I want to do it. I do love the aesthetics of a good kata. I do love when it's beautiful, when it's perfect, when it's explosive and dynamic. I love it. I think it's really great, and it's something I really enjoy. But it has to support and be secondary to being able to apply the skills that are there. So as I see people getting very comfortable and understanding through the katas and the techniques and the skills and the principles, and I'm watching them in the beginning of class go through, and I'm kind of seeing that, then every now and again I'll take someone aside or take a couple people aside, do the kata, and then just provide details of how to perform it better. That's the performance part. And I talk about that. I explain that this is the performance. This does not make you a better fighter. It makes you better at working on the biomechanics. It maybe makes the results of the solo practice, the solo skill, the training more effective, because sometimes you can refine that in a way that's going to help build the strength and stamina and balance that maybe you weren't doing yet. But that's kind of the byproduct thing. So it's secondary to the whole. So over time, you develop this set of kata that you know, but you don't know them because you know the steps of them. You know them because you can fight using their principles and their techniques and their methods and their strategies, and you can apply that fighting system. And now you have a kata that you are capable of also performing solo and demonstrating. But the truth is you have something much greater, and you're also now carrying the syllabus. You have this physical thing that you can practice that will help you remember the entirety, the totality of what you've been taught or came to understand. And lastly, if you do these kind of martial arts, you know that that set of katas isn't the only katas out there. So later, the very next step is for me to choose a kata out of the rest of the katas that I know for you that has come from how you train, how you specifically move and operate. So I pick a kata if it represents a fighting system. I pick a fighting system that matches the way you do what you do, and then we spend time diving deep into just that one thing. Spend time working hard on becoming good at that thing. So you have this base set that everybody in the room has or will have, and then you have something that's uniquely yours that you're spending time and effort building and really digging and diving deep into to understand in a broad and wide way. Then later there's the choice of once you've done that and then enough time, sufficient time has been put into that, then the next thing would be to be able to choose a kata that you'd like to learn. So bring in your own personal choice. First I choose one for you, second you choose one for you, and then spend that time learning that. And the idea being that you learn that from the person who's dedicatedly spending time developing that type of fighting. Better than learning it from me, who has a general knowledge of a lot of things. Learn it from the person who has taken that and then really dug deep and developed a specific skill set for that type of fighting. That continues to grow and evolve as I continue to work through this and see how it all plays out. It's a work in progress, but that's what I'm doing right now. That's how I'm teaching the katas and how I focus on doing it now. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully there were things you could pull out of this that you like. Hopefully you'll let me know about them. If there are things that you have questions about or things that you want to share or things that you feel like I'm dropping the ball on, hit those comments for those too. In the meantime, speaking of comments, we'll go ahead and look at some comments from last week and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, my favorite comment from last week is from Foundation Healing Arts saying, "Add to, don't take away from. A simple statement made by my sensei. No need to take away from the foundation from the house to build an addition." I agree with this partially. I think you have to be careful what you take away, but I also think you have to be careful what you add. Because if you only add to, you can end up with a syllabus that's very, very full of things, has too many things, and it can lose its original purpose, or it can struggle with identity crisis. And outright, I think sometimes there is room to take things away. I've done it. There are things in my curriculum that the original curriculum that I trained, that I look at now and say, we're not doing that. It's not conducive to the goal. It was probably added on at some point, and it needs to be removed because it's holding us back from getting where we're trying to get to. And that's a really important thing. So I don't think you should be afraid to take away from. I mean, obviously, don't take away the foundation before you build an addition. Like, if you're building a house, that's really important. But if you have a cracked foundation, a foundation that is not conducive to supporting the addition you want to have, then maybe you need to repair it. And sometimes that means cutting out parts that are not great and replacing them with parts that are ready for what you're trying to do. I don't know, that's my thoughts. What do you guys think? Foundation Healing Arts, thank you for this comment. It really gave me something to think about, and I hope that it did for everybody else too. In the meantime, we'll jump back in and we'll finish this video up. Okay, now that's it for this week. That's how I teach kata. And so last week we talked about why I still think it's important. This week we talk about how I continue to teach it. I'm excited to hear your thoughts, excited to hear the things that you think are important about all this. If this has been helpful for you, or if you've got things that you think you can help me, I'm excited to hear about that. If you like these videos, if you like what I'm doing, you can subscribe to the channel right here. If you want a playlist of these videos, you can find one. I got one for you right here, and then a couple more videos that you might like. I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.